So I'm super excited this week to interview Ali Williams for the 1,000 download celebrations, which we've already reached. So we're past 1,000 downloads. Youpie-doo. I actually went back on my two previous podcasts because I seem to be, I'm not saying pulling the carpets from under my feet, but because I've created three successive podcasts in the 5 past years instead of just focusing on one, I had no idea that my old podcasts are still having downloads and they each have over 5,000 downloads. So suddenly I grew a lot taller, thinking, oh, actually, it's not just 1,000 downloads I have to show for 5 years of podcasting. It's a lot more than that. So I just thought I'd drop that here because it made me happy. Because it
Yeah,
can be
that's
a bit
very
of a lonely
exciting.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've
So
been
first,
listening to your podcast since you started, just FYI.
wow. Oh, I
Yeah.
didn't know. So you're,
Yeah.
oh, I love talking to you just for that reason because people don't reach out. I don't know if it's a common thing. You listen to it, it
Mm.
actually maybe changed your life. I don't know. That would be interesting to know
Yeah.
if you think that it has had an impact on your life. But it's very rare that people actually reach out to you and tell you, actually, I've listened to your podcast episode, this one this week, and I want to tell you this, or it's made me think of that. And I would love for
Yeah.
that energy to start more because I don't know, do you have a podcast, Ali, or not?
No, and you know what? It's something that I keep thinking about all the time, and it's something that comes up for me all the time. And then I've even looked at the different podcasting platforms. I looked at yours to see,
Okay.
how you do yours. And I know it's definitely something that I want to do. And I've even been thinking about the format, but I've been thinking about it for years. And then okay, so if I'm going to commit to that, how can I build that into my life in
Okay.
addition to everything else that I also do,
Yeah.
And um, working in a day job that I really, really enjoy being of service and also running my own business and also being a full-time cancer patient, it needs to be about
Yeah.
balance, and I'm trying to do
No.
more writing at the moment, and my brain doesn't work the way that it used to. Thanks to chemo medication, it's slower than it used to be. So, I need to give it some more thought as to how I can make it work and stick to it, and you're
Yeah,
very
because
good at that.
thank you. And you're absolutely right, because I think with podcasts, that's the one thing, if you start, you have to keep going. Unless you
Yeah.
decide I'm going to do a series of 10 episodes and then I'm going to take a break.
Mm.
But whereas with a book, you can write it to the first draft and then forget about it forever. Nobody will ever know. So yeah, it's completely different. I would say probably the thing that is most difficult for me for podcasting is not having that feedback, but it's probably going to come anyway.
Do you
I
know
haven't
what though,
advertised it much, so yeah, go
but
ahead.
that is such a thing anyway. I send an email to my list all the time. I post all the time and, sharing information and psychoeducation. And very rarely also do I get feedback. So I think it's a thing. Everyone's busy. They read something and they move on from it. And I know that I'm a little bit like that as well when you've got a lot on your plate. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's definitely a thing. And I can remember my writing teacher, who I did a mentorship program with for 12 months, she said the same. And she said, people are going to buy your book and they'll read it, but you will never hear about the impact that it has had on them. So it is a thing. It is definitely a
Mm.
thing. And yes, we should do it, but we're all guilty of not calling back our friend or answering the text message straight away, aren't we?
I love what you said. That is so wise, I think. And I think it's really, really wise. I guess I've got used to not having the feedback, so it's not a problem. My
Mm.
why is rooted somewhere else anyway. And as you know, when you write a book, when you start a business, when you start a podcast, your why has to be very strong to keep you going. Because
Yeah.
as you say, nobody's going to come and give you an accolade for it, at least not at the start. And it should
Yeah.
be, it should be the like, the cherry on the sundae, as the Americans say, rather than the actual thing that you do it for. Otherwise, you're bound to stop after 3 episodes. Oh, nobody commented. I didn't have 1,000 likes on my episode. I'm stopping podcasting. Really? Sorry, I didn't mean to be. I didn't mean for that to be
No,
dismissive,
I
but
agree.
it makes me
I
laugh as
agree.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think, oh, do I want to bother with this part? When you have those human moments where you think, oh, what is all this for? Is anybody appreciating this? Is anybody getting this? And I just always remind myself, if one person has taken away from whatever they've read or seen that I have put out there, then that's okay. That's good. It's worth it. One person at a time is okay,
Yeah, you're right. So, since you're my first, how do we say, loyal listener that I can interview, maybe that I'm going to ask you for questions. Where do you listen to my podcast, generally, or when? What's the best time for you to listen to podcasts? How does that work for you?
So it is something that I find harder to do now,
Okay.
particularly with longer podcasts, because sometimes I listen to them in the car, but I only have, if I'm on my way to and from work or the hospital or my rooms where I see clients, I'm only ever in the car for about 15 minutes maximum. Everything is very
Ah,
close to me where I am. So that is now difficult for me to keep stopping and starting. And I don't necessarily like doing that. But, and having a broken hip at the moment, I can't do the walking along the beach that I used to. But that
oh,
was
I'm
where I
sorry.
used to
Yeah.
listen. Thank you. But that was where I used to listen to a lot of your podcasts, particularly. And when they used to come out on Mondays, back in the day, I would listen to your podcast while I was doing my like 5 a.m. beach walk. And it was, it's a fabulous time to be taking in information because there's not a lot of traffic. It's peaceful and it's quiet. And that is a really lovely time for me to be able to listen to things. I don't always get the opportunity to do that now. So I think the last couple of your episodes I've listened to, I've been moving around the house doing things. And it's been a deliberate decision to, okay, I'm going to put the AirPods in and I'm going to listen to this now. I don't do it as often as I used to. And I will be honest with that. But my life is filled
Hmm.
with many things.
Yes, and you have a lot of challenges as well. I understand that.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts myself. I do enjoy listening to them when I do the laundry or when I do the washing up, in the car. Again, I have 10 minutes journey, but for me, it doesn't seem to be an issue to stop and start. I don't know why. It's okay.
Mm.
And sometimes it depends if I have to take notes or not. If I have to take notes and there's something particularly interesting, and then I'll have to pause it, and I'm annoyed until I can find the time to actually sit down with it and write the notes. So then I'll skip
Yeah.
to something else. But it's like, but I think podcasts have definitely changed my life personally. It's almost having that
Mm.
presence, someone there, especially if they give you great advice or they talk about things that lift you or inspire you or even change your mind from your problems. So thank you for that.
Oh,
That
and it's a beautiful thing to be soaking up that knowledge and that, I love learning. So, and I love listening or reading information that is on the same wavelength as me, to learn more than what I already know. So for me, I love taking in that information. And at the end of it, um, I might only remember maybe 2 or 3 key things that stick, but they're the ones that I keep with me forever. And then I know that, oh, I've got to go back and listen to that again, or I've got to go back and read that again. Then I know where to find that information if I want to refresh my memory. That's what I love
mm.
about podcasts is just having that accessible information right there in your fingertips. You can go back to any time. You've got a digital library, for goodness sake. It's all just there for us, isn't it?
I know. I love that as well. Thank you. That's quite enlightening. So would you say that listening to the podcast, as you've listened in September, what do you feel that you learn something new when you listen to episodes generally?
Always. always. Even you remember I asked you to do a podcast about the basics of tarot?
Yes. And then I did a
Even,
three series about it because I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
yeah, that was, the simplicity of it was really what I needed. And that was exactly what you gave me. So, um, for me, it's just, I will listen to what I'm interested in. I won't listen to
Yeah.
absolutely everything because I don't always have time to do that. And I'm trying to create myself. But I think, yes, that connects with me. Yes, I want to know about that. Then I will go and listen to that. Absolutely. I can't do it when I'm going to bed because I fall asleep.
No, and
And
same for me. I don't do that before going to bed, and then because you want
no,
to be engaged with the content, don't
yeah,
you?
yeah, I want to take it in. But there's always at least one or two things that I take from there that I do remember that makes a difference to um, maybe the work that I'm going to be doing or just for myself, for my own
Mm.
growth and my own healing. There's something in that I remember. And I remember particularly the tarot episode. I remember thinking, wow, okay, I can just ask one question and use one card. And if it's that way, it's a yes. If it's that way, it's a no. I'm just like, it's so simple, but I've never known that,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always surprised because most tarot teachers make it about learning everything. Every single card, books about tarot tell you the meaning of all the
Mm,
cards, and it can feel so overwhelming when you might
too
just
much.
want a yes or no to start with, and then you build that relationship with and then maybe when you pull a certain card that says yes, you're like, oh, it was this card. Let me, I just had to pull it in front of me. Does it
Mm,
have a meaning that I need to know? Is the yes, does there's a bit more about that yes that I need to know? Then you look at the meaning. Already you've
mm.
made a connection with the tarot that's so simple. Well, I suppose it's not good for tarot teachers because that means they're not needed.
Yeah. Well, I think they are because, we always want to know the big picture, don't we?
Mm,
We always want to know more, and we want to seek that from others. I
mm.
do all the big work for myself, but I do still do the work with my healing team and my people because I want to know the bigger perspective and the bigger picture. So it's all still valuable.
Yeah. Um, so okay, so but you specifically chose one episode to listen to for the discussion today. I wouldn't keep it under about an hour, so we still have I guess we have about half an hour, a bit over half an hour to go. So you chose Stephanie Bradbury's episode on, I have to check what it's called actually. So the first thing you said before we started recording is that you enjoyed it tremendously. So could you guess
Mm.
speak to that a little bit? And I'm definitely going to make sure that Stephanie gets a link to this YouTube video so she can feel good about herself as well. That's going to be my bit of feedback as well. So yeah, let's have it. Tell me.
I just really loved her story about, that started when she was 13 and had that curiosity and how she followed that direction but has remained so grounded and so connected in it all. And there was a lot in the podcast between the two of you about traditional religion and the Pentecostal thing. And I am not an expert about religion, just let me be very very clear about that. But I loved how relatable she was. I loved how real she was. I loved how approachable she um, kind of made me feel that she would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As in,
You
if
almost wish
if
she was in
I
your
or
local church so that you could go
yes,
there. Yeah.
yes, that's how it made me feel. I thought if she was here, I would go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt the same. So just for the people watching this episode, it's the episode number 38, 31st of May, Mystical Experiences with Reverend Stephanie Bradbury. And I like what you said because I am not religious. I've departed from, the Catholic Church I grew up in, and I would have never imagined that someone like that could be in the church I grew up with. And there could
Yeah.
be actually. So it's really, for me, it's moved the needle significantly on this podcast. And one of the funny things that happened is that I actually signed up a chaplain for an episode next year as a result.
Perfect.
And yeah, exactly. And who know, I might have all sorts of different representative of other religions as well, because I don't want to be exclusive about the Christian, faith. That
No.
can come and surprise me. And in a way, this is an invitation to the universe that we both have behind us. Surprise us. Come and
Yes.
tell us about how
Yes.
much religion has evolved and how you're creating that little pocket of light where you are
Yes.
to be more inclusive, more diverse, and to get rid of the toxicity that
Yes.
can be quite prominent. Yeah. Oh,
And
thank
that's
you for.
just, I think just that's something to really celebrate because, I moved away from religion because it just became a real discord within me to be told how I should have a relationship with God and that it's only that way. It's only one way. And so I just started moving away from that. And I've had some criticism in that maybe I don't really have a relationship with God because I believe in the universe and all of the things. Well, actually, yes, I do. And it's as strong as your relationship with God, but I'm not doing it being defined and put in a box. So, what I really, really loved about listening to Stephanie was how, just how, I don't know how I can articulate it, don't know how to explain it, but how, um, I'm really struggling to find the words with this, but just how all encompassing
Yeah, there's an
it was.
inclusivity about her, how she
Yeah.
speaks. Mm.
And it wasn't even just about that, it was just about, you're not, I got the feeling that she was conveying the message you're not less than when you still connect with the bigger picture, just in a slightly different way, because I've even been told by a family member that who wouldn't read my book and who wouldn't discuss it with me because I was not religious enough. There wasn't even any talk in that book about the universe or whatever else, but I was still received that criticism because it wasn't based on God or religion or the church.
Mm.
So that really gets my back up when, God loves everybody, does he not? But it just seems that, and again, let me just say, I'm not an expert. I've not read the Bible. I don't understand it all, but I just see hypocrisy everywhere, and I find it really disappointing and really frustrating. Well, maybe I don't look at things the same way that you do, but I believe the same things that you do. So why am I wrong? And listening to Stephanie was kind of like, oh, that's it just made it a really beautiful experience for me. And it was just like, yes, why can't we have more people in the church like this?
Mm.
That was how it
No,
made me
that's
feel. And I
beautiful.
know it was hard for me to try and explain that effectively, but I just thought, yes, I would go to that church. Absolutely.
I think you're not doing yourself service. You did explain it beautifully because what I heard, and maybe it's not what you said or you thought you said. You know how we know as authors that what people receive sometimes can be different from what we send out.
Yeah.
What I got from what you were saying is that she's much more inclusive than the average person who goes to church, who maybe doesn't have as much confidence in their faith that they have to claim that you have to do it things their way, otherwise you're not doing it right.
Yes, yes. And I know that things are written in the Bible the way that they're written, but as you said at the very beginning, this is we are all evolving. So why is the way that I view the world wrong when it is still based through love? Because isn't that what this is all about? All of it? Isn't it all about love? So why does that make me less than just because I don't go and sit in a church and get told that I have to fit in a little box? I know, that might upset some people, but that's just how I feel. And, I was brought up in the church. I went to a Christian school. I work in a Christian school. And I just think there are so many people within that environment who have their own agenda and their own interpretations that there's so much, there's spirituality, but there's so much of the human element in it as well. And just my personal opinion, and again, it might upset some people. I think some people um, just take it upon themselves to tell others how they do their spirituality is wrong. And I just don't believe any of us have the right to do that.
Yeah, and I love hearing that from you. I did an episode that's titled God is Everywhere, which I think talks a little bit on that. And a recent one where I actually invite people to create their own spiritual blueprint. And I felt incredibly excited about that. It was an episode that I was going to do right from the start, but I felt it wasn't the time yet. And I know that for some people, it's almost like you have to take it or leave it. You have to take all of us or not. But that's conditional love. And I don't actually believe that God's love is conditional. I think
No.
this is when the ego steps in. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
ego that steps in because we all have an ego. And I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
triggered by people who said, I don't have an ego. I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure you're safe. If you're not aware that you have an ego or a shadow or that you do crap things, then you're going to probably project it onto me or do something or get triggered and say something and not even take responsibility for what's happened.
Yeah.
So, no, it's interesting. And I
Mm.
guess we all evolve. I know that when I was younger, I felt that the more people believed in what I believed, the stronger I felt in myself and my confidence. But of course, I've turned
Mm.
everything inward, and now my confidence comes from inside. So it doesn't matter anymore, and I'm much more
Yeah.
open to honoring all sorts of different ways that people, including
Yeah.
the people who are parochial and have to have things their way.
Yeah.
Um,
I also just personal opinion again, just restating, I'm not an expert. This is just how I feel and think based on my experiences. But I also get very concerned when people um, who don't do for themselves, they rely on higher power or
mm,
God or whoever is going to fix everything. But no higher power and God are never going to get in the way of free will. And I think people get lost to that. And I think they forget that it's still ultimately up to them. And if they're going to be open to receiving God's love, they've got to be open to loving themselves first to be able to bring it in and to not just sit back and expect that God's going to fix everything or whoever or the higher power or whatever it is that everyone believes in. None of that gets in the way of free will. And I think some people forget that.
yeah, and as I was listening to you, I think what it makes me think is that this comes from the whole patriarchal model, and of course the Jesus as a savior, and so we don't actually have to take responsibility for anything, and someone's going to fix everything for us. And I've been reflecting on that quite a lot, and for me it speaks to spiritual infancy. It's almost like if you continue to prepare the model of 2000 years ago, this was not the same planet. This was not the same people. We've evolved. And so why do we still rely on something that was said 2000 years ago, however good it was? It's still part of a past culture that almost doesn't relate to us at all anymore. Uh,
Completely agree. Yeah.
And why would God stop talking 2000 years ago as well? That's just asking that question. For me, the answer is already in the question. Of course, God
Mm,
hasn't stopped talking to us. And
yeah.
but and of course, a lot of traditionally the church, and especially the Catholic Church, we all know that, relied on their living through donations. So they had to sort of manipulate people into wanting to come, and they used fear around that. And then there's this whole, it became something that actually had nothing to do with God anymore. It had to do with the
Hmm.
human system and the
Yeah.
culture, and then the fighting, the religious war. The fact that there's a religious war for me is it's an oxymoron. How could you have a religious war if you think that religion is linked to God and God is love? It's almost impossible. So that's got to be human, and that's got to
Yeah.
be the ego messing things up. I'm sorry to say it that way,
Yeah.
but it really feels like that.
Yeah.
And
And
there's one
it's
book I read. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
no, no, no. I was just
Yeah.
going to add to that and just say now it's become such a business enterprise as well. It was, well, certainly over here, there's a fair bit of that going on, but that's not what it was ever meant to be about, as far I don't think it's meant to be that way, personally.
Yeah. Well, if I think of the Catholic Church, it's always been a business, and part of the reason is because I come from Paris, and when you go into there was one particular church that I absolutely love, that has mosaics in it and everything, and people go on a pilgrimage, and when you look, there's a shop there, and it's all the things that they sell. This is the Catholic Church. It's all merch. I know this sounds awful to say it like that, but so you're going to buy your rosary. Do you want it this way, that way, that way? And of course, everybody has to live, earn and eat
Mm,
and have a roof over their heads.
yeah,
So I don't think
I
there's
get that.
anything wrong with that side of things. It's just that we need to, I suppose, suss out what belongs where, and
Mm,
and try not to be manipulative. I suppose. I think that's what's important for me.
yeah.
I was just about to mention a book that completely opened my eyes when in my 20s, when it was, I don't know if it was when it was published, and it was called The Arabs, the Crusades Seen Through the Arab Eyes. And it
Hmm.
was absolutely mind opening or mind blowing, because I had heard so much of the narrative, and in school, even though French schools are not religious, but through history, when we talked about, there was all this narrative around the Crusades, and suddenly I had a point of view from the receiving end of those Crusades. And I started realizing that actually this is history and not religion, even though the two are interlinked. And
Yeah.
it opened my mind so much about how there's not just one truth.
Mm,
And
yeah.
sometimes religious or even spiritual groups hang on to that thing of that there's one truth. If you don't follow what we do, you will be doomed, or you'll go to hell, or you'll never go to heaven, whatever it is that they say. And
Yeah.
my gut feeling has always been just to think, no, I don't buy that. I really don't. I
Mm,
can't.
yeah. I don't subscribe to that. Um,
Mm.
I just, I just think, why can't we call it all in if we want to? Why can't we be free to do that without being judged? And I see the hypocrisy around me all the time, and I just, again, that human element and the human ego, and every single one of us has an ego and a super ego as well, and it helps us determine right and wrong, and it helps us survive crazy situations and all of that kind of thing. But I think it's the excessiveness, it's the interpretation and the the want to take it that one step further for personal gain. I struggle with that. I struggle with that.
Mm. So all
And
that
the
to
first,
say that, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 you're right. You're talking about the first book that
No,
kind
I
of
was gonna.
opened your eyes,
Oh, yeah,
and
yes.
and the first book that opened my eyes was Many Lives, Many Masters. And
Oh, I
I was just
yes.
like, what a book. And
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation with my auntie after reading that book. And, you know, her husband, my uncle, was a minister for years. And, you know, my grandparents, well, my grandfather particularly, was very strict um, in all areas of life and in religion as well. And I used to go to church with him. But my auntie ended up marrying a man who became a minister. And I remember saying to her, I have so many questions now, you know, after reading that book. And I realized this is just so much bigger than this tiny little box that I've been told I have to fit within.
Absolutely. And there's definitely an episode coming about past lives and this book.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, so I was going to
And
say all this brings us back to Reverend Bradbury and how unique she is and how she needs to be celebrated
yeah,
and honored. That for me, that
I
brought
loved when
joy.
you asked her, how can people find you? And, you know, where can they listen to? And she said, oh, it might get a bit woo woo. That is the coolest thing ever because woo woo can be seen as such a negative term
Yeah.
in so many places. It's got such negative connotations, but it's all about love. Why can't we just celebrate love in all its different forms in the way that we see it, feel it, experience it, and welcome it in and gift it as well as receiving it?
Yeah, and for me, I liked something she said set me on a course. You know, like you said, you retain one
Mm.
really strong thing or two. And one of the things I can look back to is that she talked about spiritually transformative experiences. And now it threw a light on all the things that happened to me.
Yeah.
I was able to almost like string it as a a string of pearls. Oh, that led me from
Yes.
one place to another. And I really like that term. Um, I also the other thing I got from the episode is her mentioning that book from the doctor or the researcher, the
Mm.
scientific researcher who looked into NDEs from a scientific perspective, and that was a phenomenal for me.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. There's also a fantastic series. I think I watched it on Netflix, but I can't remember what it was called. And it was all about people who had been through near death experiences and, you know, groups across, might have been the USA and Europe or both. Um, might have been the USA, I think, but they're, you know, groups of these people who meet, who have had these near death experiences. That was fascinating. I just can't for the life of me remember what it was called. Um, One thing I did want to mention that Stephanie said when she was describing her experience of when she was driving along in the car and, you know, she
Yes.
looked out the window. Um, and I connected with that so much. You know, I experience that every morning when I'm out on my grass and it's just the dawn and the birds and the breeze and the trees. That connection to just absolute pure bliss is really hard to explain and articulate, but it's in my body. It's not even in my mind, it's in my body. And you know, you and I have talked about my experience when I was diagnosed with breast cancer the first time, and then all of a sudden just received the overwhelming message and feeling that I would be okay and just surrendered to that. And that was almost like one of those bliss experiences. And before I had my mastectomy, the the pure love that I felt for the cancer tumor in my left breast is something that I will never forget because it was just a completely beautiful connection to love and everything that people find hard to understand. And so I really, really loved hearing her explain that experience because I connected with that so much.
Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. So I did a quick search whilst you were talking, which I hope the watchers will forgive me for like not watching the screen, looking at the screen. And I found two documentary, one called Surviving Death and the other one Life After Death. It's probably more Life After Death than the.
Surviving. Yeah. Yeah, I just can't remember.
Well, if there's two, let's
Yeah,
try both. I think I'm gonna
yeah,
head over
exactly.
to there because that sounds really down my and it will probably help me prepare the episode on that, which I'm
Yeah,
really, really
yeah.
looking forward to.
Really fascinating. And you also mentioned, Anita
More Journey.
Morjani's book. I also read that book and just found it fascinating how she was so explicitly able to explain what happened to her. When she left her body and she could hear and see her husband and the doctors down the hallway and everything that they were saying about her, all of that explicit detail that she was able to record and share with us as the readers in her book it was absolutely fascinating. It blows my mind how she completely recovered, and look at everything that she's doing in the world now.
Absolutely. Out of curiosity, did you read it because we mentioned it, or had you read it before? And it,
No, I read it years ago. Years ago.
okay, I read it when it came out, and I was blown away. I just loved it
Yeah,
so
me
much.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It was really, really amazing. And, like you said in the podcast, um, when we're faced, we can have our faith in whatever, but then we do the human thing. Oh, I'm going to eat vegan, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. But in some cases, it can be completely irrelevant for some people. And, you said to me, and I know I reminded you of this recently, but when I was diagnosed the second time with stage 4 cancer, you sent me a message. You pulled me back to myself and you said radical faith. And I went, yes, my radical faith. And I've never forgotten that. And it truly strengthened that for me. And it's just such a big part of who I am now, but not in the box. I do it my way.
Thank you. Um, thank you for mentioning that. Because you don't know that when I said that to you, I was like, who am I to say this to her? Who am I? And am I invalidating her in her experience? Am I hindering rather than helping?
Well, it was a
Um,
gift.
thank you.
And
I'm
I
glad it
thank you for
was.
that,
And
because
thank you.
I've been able to share that with others. And I believe I've reminded you of that also recently, I think,
Yes, you have. Yes, absolutely.
you know,
And
what a
that
gift.
speaks to the fact that we're all, it's almost like for me, I've created a whole new family.
Mm,
And with this new family, I would call it a spiritual family, but I would prefer to keep that loosely. Where we're all there for each other at different times in different ways. And perhaps
mm,
I'll help you, you'll help someone else, they'll help someone else. It'll come back to me or it won't. It doesn't matter. I know now because I used to have this mentality, and I feel a lot of compassion for my younger self because she'd been raised in such judgmental ways and limited ways of thinking and pettiness. And I used to, if I gave something to someone, I wanted something in return. I was like, why
mm,
aren't they helping me now? I've helped them. And I was in that whole energy, which is quite toxic actually. um
mm.
and I think that probably was one of the first steps on my spiritual path where I was like, I'm giving, it doesn't matter. I know it will come back. It doesn't matter who, through, when, how. This is a generous universe, and I've seen that at play, and it's actually so inspiring, isn't it?
Oh, and fulfilling, not that, like you say, it's not about the validation, but it's just so, that level of unconditional love and the altruism and the not expecting anything back. It's just the ultimate gift of love. And it just feels so fulfilling.
Hmm. I I do feel I need to add as well that it's also important not to deplete oneself, because I know spiritual people on a spiritual journey can
Yeah,
give to the point of depletion. So it's a
yeah.
balancing act. And I think what I found the most fascinating, I guess, on this journey of discovering and poking and expanding the mind is that one thing and the opposite can be true at the same time in different contexts. So it's important to have that detachment, never to expect anything back, but at the same time, it's very important to make sure that you don't deplete yourself and that you get something back. Maybe starting from yourself and learning to set those boundaries and knowing when to say no. And I think that's a journey you've been on as well, haven't you?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, I've had to learn all of those things and, for the most part, the hard way. I've had many reminders and opportunities to learn all about setting boundaries and saying no and deciding what is of service and what is just mean just gifting because I want to, or what is a message that I don't understand at the time why I need to share it. And then someone will come back and just say, that is exactly what I needed to hear today. And I just, it's those moments you're just like, okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be the channel in those moments. But yeah, it does take boundaries, definitely, and not overdoing it.
Yeah, because I hope it's okay to mention this. You used to offer free coaching for people going through cancer. And I'm glad I checked with you whether that's something that you still did. And we had this conversation that I think would be beneficial for people as well. Because initially I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And it was, but actually it didn't serve you. So sometimes it's also important to always come back to the self and say, yeah, I'd like to have this lovely thing that I want to do, but how does that, and when I say serve you, we're not talking about selfishness here. We're talking about putting your oxygen mask on first. So you make sure that you're okay. And I know that when I started on my, when I started even like as practicing as a healer, I didn't have that mask at all. I was like almost running my business as a charity, but never having really any funds coming in. So I gave away free this, free that, free that. But I've completely changed in the 10 years since I've started my business. And now I like, okay, make sure I have the money that I need. And then it's more of an ad hoc thing. I'll be guided. Someone will tell me, gift this to that person. And I won't publish it. Nobody will know about this. It's between that person and I because I received the message and it feels right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you do keep offering those free things, there's a lot of junkies out there, as someone said to me once. And then the intention of why they come to you is not maybe the same as it would be if they were seeking for themselves. And I've come to realize, at one point, I just wanted to fix everyone because I thought, oh, I've got all this information. I know how to help people change their lives. And just lost my train of thought. But I've completely lost my train of thought.
No, it was about giving free and attracting the wrong crowd as well.
Yeah. I think, when people see something on offer and they think, I believe that will really help me, as opposed to, oh, that's just that's for free. I'll just pick it up and see what happens. I know what I was going to say. In the beginning, 7 years ago when I started my business and I started mentoring other people and I was volunteering for the hospital, which I still do. I talk to patients and whatever, but they have to want to. I just wanted to fix everyone back then, and now I know the difference. And, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, I started to realize I can't just fix everyone. Not everyone wants to be fixed, and you can't do anything about those people that don't want to do it for themselves. Or if they're seeking the answers for you from like us as healers and therapists, if they think that we are going to be able to tell them what to do and how to do it, then they're missing the point. They're not connecting to anything that's going to help themselves. So, and, I think they have to have, linking it back to what we were talking about, the podcast, they've got to have that, some kind of faith within themselves to know to step up to do this for themselves and not just sit back and wait for someone else to come along and make everything okay. There's a difference between those people who really know that they need to do it for themselves, as opposed to, oh, well, I'll just do it anyway because it's free. It's a very, very different kind of energy and intention, which creates a very different outcome.
I think there could be a whole episode about free stuff.
Oh, yes.
Maybe not on the podcast though. I'm thinking, I don't know how could I link that back to spirituality, but there's a trend, because there's also people who come to you and say, how dare you charge for something that God's given you? And that's a whole different topic, which is quite fun. It is fun for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, you eat, you feed your kids, you buy clothes. Why shouldn't I? Just because, I'm connected to the bigger picture. But it's actually not been an issue for very long for me. At the very start, it was, because it's almost like, this is something I find really funny. It's almost like when I left the corporate world and my job as a lawyer and embraced my spiritual path, it's almost like I put on a coat of poverty. That was a collective energy of the spiritual community around money, around charging, etc. And that was a fun thing to deconstruct, because it was the contrast was so stark. It was very, very powerful, actually. Good reflection.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that was very different, wasn't it?
So we've almost come to the end of this interview, unless you wanted to add something specific, but I'd also like to ask you, how can people find you? Because you're on YouTube now with me, which is different from the podcast.
Hi, YouTube. I've never delved into YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel, but I just use it to house my videos that I record in workshops and then share them with my clients. So I'm on Instagram as Ali Williams Coaching and Therapy. I'm also on Instagram as Woman Activated. They're two different accounts with two different kind of themes, because the first one was all about, started with my cancer journey and then turned into my coaching and therapy, and the other one is more on my spiritual side. I haven't figured out how to meld the two. The two communities are different, so I wasn't going to try and force everyone to follow along. But my Woman Activated account is my more spiritual self, connecting into my practices and my beliefs. And then I have a website called alijwilliams.com, and that's probably maybe the easiest place to find me. It's got all the details and email address and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'll add all the links in the show notes as well. Not the show notes. This is a video. My old habits kicking in the description box under this video. So thank you so much for everyone who's watching this video as a replay on YouTube. And thank you for taking part in the 1,000 download celebration, Ali. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. So this has been a true privilege.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations, because you share so much valuable information on your podcast and you ask the juicy questions. I love it.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
All the best.